Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. Victor Wanyama confirms what we thought. An update from the coach on Romel Quioto. The coach discusses the Camacho trade. Saint-Pierre is disappointed. Why? You'll find out. Messi's playing in Nashville in the Leagues Cup final. What can we expect from TFC on Sunday night? That and much more. It's CF Montreal Talk, the Sick Podcast. Marinaro. I'll be joined by Jeremy Filosa of 98.5 FM and MFC Radio, and former Montreal Impact player, coach, sporting director, business relations. He had all the titles. He's Nick DeSantis. We're coming up.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. CF Montreal Talk.
Here's the chance. They've got the goal. Absolutely incredible. Cameron Porter delivers the goal to send Montreal Impact into the CONCACAF Champions League semi-final.
The sickest CF Montreal podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. Without further ado, let's bring them in. Jeremy Filosa and Nick DeSantis. Hi, guys. We were waiting for a time to do this. Jeremy went to meet with the coach and some of the players earlier this morning. It was media availability, and so we're going to tackle it right away. Guys, good morning. Jeremy,
morning. Victor
Wanyama confirmed what exactly?
Well, what he confirmed is that he was injured before the break. He had an ankle injury, and I had reported seeing him walk out of the stadium at Saputo right before the break in a game in which he came in as a substitute, didn't play many minutes, but he was struggling to put one foot in front of the other. So, we saw that Wanyama over, the maybe 3 weeks before the break. Some games he was dressed. There was one game he was not. Some games he would start. Some games he was a substitute. So he confirmed that he did have an ankle injury. Good news is that ankle injury has healed now. He's ready to go. He's 100%. But from the information that I'm able to gather over the last couple of weeks, Coach Losada has a little bit of a vision that's a little bit different now with Samuel Piet coming back into the mix, where, I'm suspecting that Victor Wanyama will not be starting games consecutively as he's always been since he's been at CF Montreal. I think his role under Losada will change now. I think Losada, in his style of play, prefers a guy like Piet, prefers midfielders like Choinière and Saliba. So expect a diminished role for Victor Wanyama from here on end, unless obviously somebody gets hurt or something else changes.
Nick, what are your thoughts, and how does it work when a sporting director brings back a player, gives them the DP tag, but the player may not exactly fall in line with the way the coach wants to play? How difficult does that become at all?
Yeah, so, that's something that, when, we spoke about it the last episode, is that when you bring on a DP, you got to make sure that you get it right. In terms of, for me, a designated player is a difference maker, okay? I don't think that Wanyama is a difference maker. Was he a DP? Is he at a certain level? Yes, a couple of years ago, because he brought in a certain personality. He played at the highest level, very strong physically. I think that he brought something to the table. But I truly believe that DP status, should be a player that is a difference maker, that you're not into these situations where the sporting director thinks one way and the coach says, well, listen, I think that as a defensive mid, I have a guy that's going to run more, that's going to be maybe fully committed to how I want to play. You don't want to get into those situations. And now he's in a situation probably that these are the discussions they're having in the coach's room, is saying, who do we feel that is more ready today? Who do we feel that is more committed? Because, in the end, I think Wanyama brings a certain experience of a high level, But Piet today brings a kid from here, a kid that's totally committed, a kid that, is going to put his heart and soul on the field every game. So this is the dilemma, I guess, they're going through. And again, we're not in the dressing room. We don't know exactly what's going on. But, from what you're saying, I gather this to a certain extent.
But we can also take a look at the organizational depth chart, guys, and say that it's going to be tough for Wanyama going forward. Obviously, he's a certain age. I think he was even contemplating retirement before they decided to bring him back. Their philosophy is they want to sell players. They're not going to be selling Victor Wanyama, but they will be selling one day Nathan Saliba. One day they will be selling Reda Zouhir, who, by the way, is tearing apart the USL as a midfielder who's got 7 goals in 15 games. The goal that he scored a couple of days ago was just absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
He has a big-time strike, Reda. He's got a really strong shot for a guy who's a midfielder. So let's put it this way. You have Piet, who's not going anywhere. He's a hometown favorite, and he wants to stay here. You have Saliba, who you need to play, and you want to play because you want to sell. You have Reda Zouhir, who's possibly going to come back from the USL at the end of the season. There's a player that you sent to Italy, Matteo Scavoni, who can play in that role one day. You're probably going to bring back at one point if things don't work out in Europe. I don't want to put Nick on the spot, but his nephew is gaining ground, Alessandro, who's got his feet wet over the last 3 or 4 weeks in Ligue 1 Quebec. And at one point, if he keeps on going the way he's going, you could think that you would see him there. So you add it all up, there's a lot of players that play the same, not to mention the Choinière can play that position too.
Yeah, Choinière can play that position. But guys, this is the situation that they put themselves into, is that, honestly, to tell you the truth, I didn't think Wanyama was going to come back. He signed for 2 years, 1.5, 1.8. It's a lot less than he was making before, 3 million. But for a team like CF Montreal that doesn't spend, it's a lot of money. Now, as you mentioned, we've placed ourselves in a situation where the coach would prefer to give more minutes to the guys that we just mentioned. And so you're a little bit stuck because Wanyama is not going to be able to find another team that's going to want to pay him 1.8 million next year. Also, I think that some of the rumors that have surfaced in the month of June concerning a possible trade with New England maybe has, ruffled his feathers a little bit. Now that I hear what I am hearing, the fact that the team may be considering not playing him as much, maybe there was something to those rumors in June. Maybe it was something concrete behind that. But now, what are you going to do with this player? Is he going to accept that despite the fact that he's a DP, despite the fact that he's the most paid player on the team, from now on, he might be a guy that's not going to start every game. He might be a guy that may not even come off the bench every game. Will he accept that role? If not, you're going to have a problem in your hands at the end of the season.
Nick? But guys, I think this goes on all over the world. It goes on all over the world. It's part of the environment. This is what it is. And in the end, that's why there's management. That's why, these situations, when they arrive, how do you manage it in the best way possible?
Yeah.
That's part of it. That's all over
Nick,
the world.
I understand what you're saying. But in an organization that wants to spend so little money, and by the way, after the recent transactions Montreal has made, their payroll has now gone from 10 million to 9 million. You don't have that benefit of the doubt, Nick. If you have, like Miami, 5 guys who make over $1 million and you say one of them is not playing as much, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, but Jeremy,
when he's your only DP, when he's your only DP, what's the leeway there? There's no... Jeremy,
with all due respect to Wanyama, we know that if they were going to spend 1.5 or $2 million, they should have spent it on another player at another position. And by the way, a player who was already younger, who's also younger, who you could have also sold with your philosophy that you have. But how about this, Nick? Between now and the end of the year, would you try Victor Wanyama at center back in practice to see how he can do?
Depending on the center backs and their situation and where they're at, and if you're talking about the discussion of putting guys on the field to value them, to increase their values. It's the same thing at center back position too. So,
Yes.
Would I think about it? 100%, because of his experience, because maybe, the game's gotten faster for him and now he sees everything in front of him instead of always having to look behind him.
He
Instead of
played that position before, by the way, in England. He started off there.
Well, that's something that, for me, I would for sure think about it. But again, you don't, the same way you're saying that they want young midfielders to play, it's the same thing for the center back position as well.
Correct.
I don't
because
think
they're
it's a
probably
good
going to want
idea.
to put Joel Waterman there, and they're probably going to want to sell Joel Waterman in a year and a half or 2 years as well.
I don't think it's a good idea, guys. I don't think he's able. The way that he moves on the field, I don't think would be ideal for him to play that position. I can tell you one thing, and with all due respect to Nathan Saliba, when you have guys around him like Campbell, like Waterman, like Corbo, I could tell you one thing. They feel a lot more comfortable with a guy like Wanyama in front of them and not a guy like Saliba. Saliba's
Listen,
just not there
that's true
yet.
too.
Well, I don't think Saliba is ready to take that responsibility.
Of course.
Remember, guys, that number 6 position, especially with 3 in the back, is extremely, extremely crucial. Because
Absolutely.
in those positions there, whether you're trying to get out of pressure and going forward, you lose the ball in those areas there, you're going to get completely exposed with players. And especially, knowing the MLS, usually the difference makers are the 10s, the wingers, and the forward. So
But
I'll
Jeremy,
tell you
don't
one thing,
forget-
guys. I
Jeremy-
would have been more comfortable with them losing Wanyama right now than Camacho if I had to make a choice. But that's just me.
Well, they have so much depth at that position, and the difference between the starter and the backup is obviously not as significant. I hear what you're saying, but Jeremy, keep in mind, and Nick can tell you this as well, there's a reason why some center backs play 36, 37, 38, and they get slower, but they're still very effective. The Nestas, the Chiellinis, the Bonucci's of this world, these guys could have played until 40 years old. It's not a problem because with your experience and your intelligence, that's what ends up making up for maybe your lack of pace or your lack of speed as you get older. Anyway, we understand what it is, and we're going to move on. An update on Romel Quioto's health, Jeremy.
Okay, so the coach told us this morning that, we all know that Vasily Krementzidis told TSN Radio that they were shooting for September 16th for a return. The coach told us that last week, he didn't say that Quioto had a setback, but he said that he struggled to run properly. So if you're struggling to run and to train on your own, he said, we still don't know at this moment when he'll be able to join the group. That leads me to believe, guys, because this was my question for Lozada this morning, is are you guys preparing Romel Quioto so that he can play some minutes with Honduras in the next window?
That's not gonna happen.
So, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. We're 2 weeks away from that window. Quioto is still training on his own. So, realistically, guys, I don't see Quioto being able to represent Honduras in 2 weeks. Not the way that he's progressing right now.
Nick, if you were there and you were in charge and your number one striker, your goal scorer the past couple of years, a guy you're really going to need down the stretch here, if you want to make a push for the playoffs or make the playoffs, was away from the team for 3 months. He comes back. He's training solo, 1 day on the field, 1 day in the complex, 1 day on the field, 1 day in the complex. And he comes back and he says, you know what? Okay, I'm good now. I'm leaving to play international duty with Honduras. You would say what?
Difficult situation. That's why, to me, is, when situations like this arise, it's always what relationship is built between the player and the club. Because for me, for him to be away for 3 months, basically he decided that, they gave him that opportunity. So if he decided that, then he comes back and all of a sudden, if Jeremy's saying that he's not even running right, then he might be still ways because, when you're not running right, the first thing is you're compensating on other aspects, and it could just get worse in terms of his injury. So do I believe that he'll be the one to say, listen, I want to go play for the national team if he's not right? I don't think that will happen. And again, these are situations, they're very personal club player the relationship, the trust there is between one and the other. But like I said, it was a red flag when it was mentioned that he was gone for 3 months. And I don't know what the situation between him and the club in terms of relationship is.
Well, obviously the relationship between him and the club it's not ideal right now. Obviously, we know that because comments were made publicly. So when comments are made publicly, you can imagine what's being said behind closed doors. So the relationship is not 10 on 10, that's for sure. And then the relationship
You're talking about the comments from Olivier Renard saying that
Yes.
Romel, il fait le party ici et là, he's there, he's everywhere.
Yes.
And l'avion va venir, puis on espère qu'il va être dedans.
Yes and yes. All of that, okay? I know the team was not happy about the fact that he left for so long and this and that. I can also tell you that the relationship between CF Montreal and Honduras is not good because in the past, unfortunately, I have to say this, they abused of the situation. You know, Romel Quioto went to play 2 friendlies. One was against Argentina. The other one, I think, was against Guatemala.
Well, he had to take a picture with Messi.
Yeah, they started. No, but that's okay. That's okay. You start him in one of the 2 games. The CF Montreal was headed into a playoff stretch. They started him for both games. He played most of those 2 games. Came back banged up. Again, it was a problem for the team. The last 3 years, guys, it's been a problem for CF Montreal and Honduras. Don't forget the Honduran national team also gave a public update of his injury without consulting the club 2 years ago. So relationships are not good between Honduras and CF Montreal.
And I don't think it's Montreal's fault because I think they're trying to do the right things as a club, right? And in the end, sometimes even though you try to do the right thing, you don't have total control of the situation. And right now, it becomes frustrating, and it gets to a certain point where there's public comments made. Because sometimes, the people always think it's against the club, which it shouldn't be at times, and that time there, maybe they just kind of brought it out publicly saying, well, guys, listen, this is what's really going on, because we're tired of always taking the blame.
But Nick, here's the challenge. When public comments are made from someone in a position of power within the club, vis-a-vis a player or his situation, if it's a young player who doesn't have a lot of leverage, you swallow your pill, you come back, you're very hungry, you're very motivated, and you work your butt off to try and prove everyone wrong and to silence them. When it's an older player who's a more experienced player who has a certain persona, certain prestige, and is very nonchalant in his ways, those public comments may not actually motivate him. They may actually tick him off. But if they tick him off and not motivate him, maybe he's not in the biggest hurry to come back. Now, some watching and listening are going to say, yeah, but he doesn't have a contract at the end of the year. He's playing for a contract. His agent probably has something lined up for him already. B, he probably thinks that even if he doesn't play and he rests, that based on his career and his track record in his last couple of years, he can get something pretty good. C, if he's not 100%, he might not want to come back early and force an injury when his contract's up at the end of the year.
But the question that I ask, is how is it that the relationship between the management and key players keeps deteriorating? It deteriorated badly with Kai Kamara. It deteriorated sufficiently with Camacho for him to ask to leave the city where his kids live in, by the way. Okay? Yes. Can you imagine that, all right? And now you have Quioto, who the situation has deteriorated. And
it's
Tony,
a very simple answer.
Go ahead.
Well, the relationship has gone sour with players that they don't want anymore.
But these are your key players. These are the guys that made you win last year. If you don't have those 3 players,
and we're getting back to the winning. Jeremy, the philosophy is playing young players and selling them.
No, I know, but sometimes guys, players, they use, certain avenues to hold you hostage. And it all depends on the club. It depends on the club how they want to react. And I'll give you a perfect example, which I thought, even though look at Toronto and when Bernardeschi came out, all right, and totally destroyed the coach. Yeah. And I thought, and again, I still think that, Toronto has had a lot of troubles. Bradley had a hard time there. But I felt that after his comments, I think Bradley handled it in a great way because he didn't go public. He didn't fight back against him. All right. And sometimes not saying anything says more than saying something. And you know, it all depends on the club. It all depends on the person in those situations, how they want to react from it. But I can tell you that a lot of players at times hold you hostage. You know?
Understand, Nick,
and
that could be. But when it's 1 and 2 and it's 3 and it's 4, at a certain point, are these guys all holding you hostage, or is maybe something that you're doing, you know, irritating them?
Look, Jeremy,
that's something you'll never know because you're not in those rooms, in those discussions.
Yes, but whether we like it or not, whether we approve or we don't approve, Olivier Renard has sa façon de faire. You know what I mean? This is his way. It's a way that has, I guess, he thinks worked for him in the past. It doesn't look like he's going to change his ways. It looks like when he gives messages through the media vis-a-vis these players, this is what he wants to do. So listen, if this is what he wants to do, he's got the power to do it. Let him do it. And qu'est-ce qui arrivera, arrivera. But once again, I don't see him taking shots at players that he wants to keep here and develop here and sell here. Like
that's true. So, he protects those players.
All right. Okay. I think it's for the very first time the coach discussed the Camacho trade.
Yeah. So you know, the first thing that he said is that obviously he's losing a big piece in his defense. I asked him specifically if he was involved in those talks, if he was consulted. He didn't directly answer the question. What he said is that, look, we have other guys that we're going to try at that position. He said, I don't know exactly what the what's the word I'm looking for? The difference in quality is going to be, you know, between what Camacho was bringing and whoever's going to take his place is going to be. We suspect strongly that it's going to be Waterman. We'll see. And then he said, listen, despite all of that, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be coaching this team, and I will do the best that I can to put a competitive team on the field with the elements that are given to me.
That's his way of saying, guys, I wish I could speak, but you know what? I can't speak. So let me just swallow my pill. I'm here. I'm going to work. I'm going to get paid. And away para la. Right? It's his way of saying that he wouldn't have wanted, he would have wanted to keep Camacho. But clearly he wasn't.
Listen, from what we're hearing, yeah, I mean, if it was up to him, he would have liked Camacho to stick around and finish this season with the team.
Well, I think when a coach says, I will work with the elements the club's given me, it is a message too, saying this is what I have and I will do my best possible. So, of course, losing a piece like Camacho, especially, you know, when they've changed since a couple of years in a back three, I think it suited him perfectly because he was able to come out of the back cleanly. You know, even though, you know, I think Waterman, you know, the games I saw this year and the games I saw when Wilfred was there, you know, I think it was clear to Waterman when you get it, find that 5-yard ball to your midfielder, to the next line. You know, a couple of times I saw Waterman this year, you know, he was trying 30-yard balls, which, you know, he doesn't have the ability to do that. And, you know, these are players that if they play within their limits, you know, they can manage. If they try to get out of their limits because all of a sudden they're overconfident and they can feel they can do things which they can't, then it becomes complicated.
Listen, I remember a conversation in the spring, and I don't remember who mentioned this. I'm pretty sure, I think it was Olivier Renard that mentioned that Waterman had told them that he didn't feel 100% comfortable playing the position of libero. So now that means they're basically going to be forcing it a little bit because the coach also said that Alvarez is not ready right now. So if you wanted to say we're going to play Corbo in the middle, keep Waterman on the right, and we'll start Alvarez. Well, Alvarez, from what the coach has told us, is he's a project, he's a young player, and he's going to need time.
But we were also
he's not a guy that's going to be getting starts anytime soon.
Yeah, but we were also told that Camacho wasn't comfortable playing
in four.
In a back line of four.
Yeah.
And, you know.
I'm not too sure if you ask Camacho that question that he would say that, but.
Yeah, but, you know, they have their style of play, and so they're going to reinforce their points. They're going to say what they want. They're playing with three in the back, and that's it. Nick, based on the practices I watched in the last week. I attended 3 of them. Based on what I saw, Waterman's going to be the guy that's going to get the opportunity at center back, with Corbo playing left center back and a possibility of Herrera playing right center back, at which point Lapalainen would be your right wing back, Lassiter would be your left wing back. The options at 6, we know who they are. They're Wanyama, they're Piet, they're Saliba.
But don't forget that Campbell is a right-footed defenseman. He can play on the right.
He can. Campbell can be that right center back, either him or Herrera. Now, I saw Herrera at right center back. I wasn't overly convinced. I think he's better as...
I think you asked Sofiane Benzaza his opinion, no, on that?
Listen, I'm going to tell you this. It's funny, okay? And it doesn't mean I'm right. I have an opinion like everyone else. Between the right center back that we saw Herrera play and the right wing back that we saw Herrera play, I think Herrera would be at his best in a 4-man back line and right back, period. But that's...
Well, they're not going there. And they confirmed that this morning that there's not going to be a style change. Despite the long break, that they did not work on changing the tactic or the formation they want to play in.
Listen, Olivier Renard told us a couple of years ago, this is the way he wants to play. And whether it's going to be... whether it's going to be Wilfred Nancy or it's going to be Hernan Losada or it's going to be Jeremy Filosa, they're playing with 3 in the back.
This was understood when they hired Losada, so there's no changing
Sam
that.
Piet, disappointed. Why?
Sam is disappointed because, as you probably, if you follow the Canadian national team, you've noticed that at this moment there are no games scheduled in the September window. Now, Soccer Canada, if you remember well, in the middle of the summer, informed people that there was this possibility that we were going to have to skip a window. So right now, we're 2 weeks away from the September window. Nothing has been organized. No games have been scheduled. Not even a camp has been scheduled for players to get together. Don't forget, in October, you start Nations League all over again. Don't forget, you're trying to qualify for Copa America for next summer, and you're not playing any games. Almost every other country in the world is playing. CONCACAF nations that don't have a tenth of the budget that Canada has, or the population or the means, are going to be playing games. And Canada will be sitting back, twirling their fingers, not being active. And so Piet said that the federation is basically saying that they can't afford it because the players are asking too much money. He said that the players are right now trying to pressure Soccer Canada into organizing at least a camp and preferably at least one game. But at this moment in time, 2 weeks away from this window, it seems as though nothing's going to be going on. It's terrible to think of. Terrible, knowing that we're going to be hosting the next World Cup.
There's a lack of resources, obviously. We know that. We know there was resources that had to go towards the women. Recently, there was a camp that had less staff as well because there's less money around right now. It's obviously not an easy time for Canada Soccer as they try to navigate throughout this whole thing. But I will tell you this, and I'm not happy to say it, but if I think it, I'm going to say it anyway. We all love Saint-Piet. He took a very important decision to come back to Montreal. But you wonder going forward, when we get to the 2026 World Cup, how many starters are going to be MLS players at that point? And in a preferred situation, I don't think the Soccer Canada program, the coaching staff, the people behind it, are going to have that many. They've identified their top leagues in the world. They're, of course, England, Italy, Spain, which is probably...
Yeah, but Tony, this has nothing to do with the fact that there's nothing planned
in
2 weeks' time.
I understand that. I'm just saying that I'm just picking up.
I'm pretty sure that Sam today said pretty much what all the other players are thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing is, again, you take a step forward and then, you take 2 steps back, and, you see it with clubs, trying to find stability. And at the national team, the program, when you think about it, they took a major step forward with this World Cup, the last World Cup. There was excitement, and all of a sudden, now, if I go back and I start thinking even of the last U20 qualifiers, they had a week preparation, to go into the qualifiers. How can you prepare a team? And to me, I think that when you see the importance of the U20 World Cup, these are all the upcoming stars. And when you talk about Canada and you talk about players, upcoming players, and all of a sudden you lost an opportunity now. You lost an opportunity because a lot of these players too were within academies, whether it's the CF, whether it's the Whitecaps, whether it's Toronto FC. And these kids here have an opportunity to go on the biggest stage, right? Where all the scouts, all the clubs around the world are, because that's the future, and you lost out on that opportunity because you don't have the funds, right, and budgets to put these guys in the best situation to compete. And these are the things that at times always brings me back to say, we're just not there yet. And, we have glimpse, the same way with the club, with the country as well. You have a glimpse of a generation that was able to qualify, a generation that a lot of these players are playing tier 1 soccer. But then underneath, when you're saying, okay, where's the upcoming generation? Where's all the potential players that are in academies and have an opportunity to be at the biggest window? And you go to the qualifiers and you go 1 week before to play 2 exhibition games, all right, against, I think it was Costa Rica, and going into a qualifier. These are the things that are frustrating, because overall, you're still not putting these kids in the best conditions to compete, to help clubs, to help amateur soccer, to help professional soccer, and to help the federation.
Listen, the reality is this latest contract that they've signed, which is a 10-year contract, has impeded them massively, because you could probably, with the popularity of Soccer Canada and everything that they've done over the last year, you could probably go out there and find 1 or 2 major sponsors that are going to help you massively get the money that you need to all the different levels and programs and coaches and everything. But the fact that you're playing basically behind closed doors on a platform, One Soccer, that basically 99.9% of people don't have and don't watch, it absolutely kills you. Because if you're a major sponsor, you're McDonald's, you're Nike, you're anybody, why would you put all that money into a program that's not going to give you that visibility? It's a killer.
But Jeremy, who do you blame for
in the various levels
who do you blame for that?
Soccer Canada.
Okay.
Jeremy, can the various levels of government, the country itself, kick in when money's given towards sport and help out? Because obviously it's not complicated, guys. What's happening right now is you have a pie, right? And the money that you have within the federation, you have to see how you're going to split it in the pie. But with a World Cup that just passed and another World Cup fastly approaching in 2026, most of the resources they're going to want to put into the men's national team, which leaves very little for the teams below it. And then, of course, on the women's side and the teams below the national team. So at that point, I mean, they need an injection.
They need an injection,
they need relief from CONCACAF. They need an injection.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I think the answer is they need to get major sponsorship, and those sponsors are not going to dish out that money if they're not going to gain any visibility. So it's a catch-22. You jumped on that $100 million when you got it. You took it for the next 10 years because nobody else was offering you anything, but there was no out clause in that contract saying, you know what, if this thing doesn't work for us after 3 years, after 5 years, we can renegotiate or we can opt out. You're stuck. You're stuck.
Guys, Messi spoke for the first time yesterday to members of the media in Miami. Yeah. He blew everyone away once again with the humility that we've come to know him. Asked if he'll play on turf and said, I used to play on turf all the time as an academy player. I'll play anywhere. Just really excited about his move to Miami. Talked about it. You know, He had already been there before. He loved it before. He loves the Latinos. He loves the passion. And he knew right then and there when he was vacationing that was going to be a great spot for him to play. His family's happy. They're in a temporary home right now. They're going to go into a more permanent home pretty soon. His kids are about ready to get ready for school. He's just loving every minute of it. We haven't seen, the last time we saw the smile, obviously, was when he won the World Cup, but we never saw a smile like this when he was at PSG. He plays in Nashville tomorrow night, 9 p.m. in the final of the Leagues Cup. Both Inter Miami and Nashville, who entered the league just a couple of years ago, already qualified for the CONCACAF Champions League. Amazing stuff, guys?
I watched most of the press conference, and when you said when a guy's happy, it makes the world of difference. And then you start thinking about, okay, why is he happy? He's happy because I think, like he said, they took their time in regards to making a decision of what his next step was. All right. And, there's so many different options for him. I truly believe he made the best decision possible for his family and for himself, because first and foremost, already the way the club greeted him, because remember, guys, and you can go, to other players, top level players, that all of a sudden the environment isn't right, things aren't going right. Yes, you're dealing with Messi, but I think even as a club, they made sure they did everything right for him to really, really feel, man, this is where I want to be, and I made the right decision. And it shows by his play. It shows as well because he committed himself to this project. He took on a big responsibility because he could have easily says, I'm going to a last place team. This guy can't play. All of a sudden he comes in and everything around him, I just take Joseph Martinez. Joseph Martinez for the last couple of years has been trying to find his way. He's been trying to find he's had injuries, but he got back and he's been trying to find his way. Yeah. And I think Messi resurged him. Why? Because all of a sudden now he knows he has a responsibility to live up to expectations. Why? Because the Messi's around. You see kids around him, and I look at that kid Kremaski. Yeah. And I look at what he does, and it almost makes me feel Messi with the Argentinian national team. And I look at the players, which are all top tier 1 players around the Messi on the Argentinian national team, but they were all there for him. And they fought for him tooth and nail, right? To get to where he needed to be, because that World Cup was weighing a ton on his shoulders. And he had a country and a group of players and staff that said, we're going to take you there. And I think that in Miami, it's the same mentality. And I think Tata Martino being there is a positive aspect, because he, I guess, laid down the foundation of saying, this is how we're going to be, right? And Messi's going to take you, but you guys need to be there for him. And every guy on that team is there for him, and he's paying him back by saying, guys, I will take care of what I need to take care of. You guys do the rest. And right now, it's enjoyable to watch, because he's still in this league. And I said it the other day, is that for all the good he's doing, I think he's exposing the league as well in terms of the level of play, because what he does on the field, all right, at his age and everything, I'm saying you're exposing the level. And the other night, there was one goal that was scored. I think it was the second goal, where, the whole middle were worried about Messi and basically gave a whole passing lane through the middle, because they were more worried about Messi. And Messi just went deeper on the field, and he was like, they're all going to follow me. And now Taylor was able to make one pass to slice a whole defense for Jordi Alba to go into,
It was the third goal.
It was the third goal. But anyways,
just Martinez scored first, Messi scored second, and Jordi Alba scored third.
Yeah. Right. And just to say that, when he made the comment about the turf, that isn't a problem, he made that comment because he's happy. He feels he's in a great situation, and he didn't want to act as if I'm a prima donna. I can't play on turf. I've played on turf all my life in terms of, being at the Barcelona Academy and being at the juvenile level and playing on turf. And I'm not worried about playing on turf here, which is a big statement. But that, again, it's because everything is right. He's feeling good about himself. He's feeling good about the decision he's made, and everything is going in the right direction.
Jeremy, Nick makes some great points, because look at even Taylor on that pass to Jordi Alba. And by the way, Taylor scored a couple of goals. Taylor's like, I got to play at my 150% because you know what? I don't want to make Messi look bad. Everyone feels an obligation to him. The back line for most is considered their Achilles heel. It's not as strong as, let's say, their midfield is, or they are with their more of their offense.
But that's for every team in the MLS, Tony.
You're right about
but
that.
the thing is,
there's less invested in those positions. But even then, by having Busquets in front of them and Alba next to them, did you see the way they sweated it out last game? They really worked hard. Like, come on, Miller battled last game.
Absolutely. And you know what? Even if you do make one or two mistakes in a game and one of them ends up at the back of the net, it's not the end of the world, because the offense is producing 3 to 4 goals a game. So you can afford to have that, in the back. So, listen, everything that we're seeing from him is fantastic. That press conference yesterday, 2 little jabs, obviously, at the PSG or at Paris in general, because he mentioned twice that it was a world of a difference being in Miami compared to being there in terms of the reception that he got, the love that he's getting from fans, the support. And he mentioned more than once, he's like, it's not only in Miami, it's everywhere that I've gone so far in the United States, because even when he's on the road, it's basically like a home game for him because everybody's there to see him. So, listen, he's brought a lot of eyeballs to the MLS. We're all very thankful for that, because even over the last 3 to 4 weeks, Tony, if it wasn't for him, what would we be talking about in our podcasts? So, so very thankful for that. I see a lot of people are now watching the games. A lot of people have subscribed to Apple TV. They've doubled their numbers since the announcement, since Messi has announced that he's coming to the MLS. So this is all positive. It's all positive. We can't ask for anything more. He's doing exactly what we needed him to be doing to make this league go to the next level.
And it's great. And there's a competition going on between the Saudi League and the MLS as well. And the Saudi League wants to become bigger than the MLS. They claim they already are. Some rankings don't have them quite that. But I know that Jeremy and I here in the media, we're waiting for the day where we will be paid $100,000 per tweet.
Just like Neymar.
$100,000 per tweet. Jeremy, we'll settle for $100,000 per tweet.
Yeah.
What's going on, Jeremy? What's going on with TFC? Of course, CF Montreal is there on Sunday night.
Well,
TFC and Jovinko has asked for permission to train at the TFC training facility.
Yeah,
this is very interesting. Like, he's actually training. So if they're using 80% of the field, he's using like the other 20%. He's actually on the same field as them.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have a contract or anything like that. Obviously, it brought a lot of speculation because the team is really not doing well at all. But Hernan Lozada told us this morning that he expects Insigne and Bradley to be playing on Sunday. I don't know if as starters or what, but from the information he's gathered, he's expecting them to be there, and he's preparing his team as though they will both be back. And he said it's going to be a completely different team from the team we faced the last time with those 2 pieces in the lineup. So that's what he's expecting from TFC.
Nick, their new general manager, or who was named general manager over a month ago now, Jason Hernandez, said it's going to take a while for us to fix this here. What would be step one in your opinion? I'm talking about TFC, obviously.
Well, find a coach. That's first and foremost, which I think that's their priority right now.
The question you have to ask yourself before you find the coach, though, is what kind of makeup of team do you want to have, right? Because if you want to continue going with a European flavor,
I know, but Tony, you have to understand that right now they have players on contract that, even though you want to get rid of them, remember the monies that they're paying out. They're going to want to make some money. So it's a whole, because their question too is, okay, if we do bring a coach where we feel can deal with these players and bring them back to the level they're at. Like, there's so many questions up in the air. The reality too is
to bring in an Italian coach, Nick.
That's something that they have to think about. They know what's going on between four walls. The only thing is that, I think the Bradley, the player, will make a difference. Why? Because he's going to bring in a certain personality on the field. He's a guy that has a lot of pride, that's very professional, just in terms of, I don't know him personally, but when you look at him and the way he handles himself on a field, he's a leader, he's a captain, he's a guy that leads by example, and he's a guy that's going to hopefully rally the team around, all right, because they are missing a lot of pieces. There's a lot of pieces there that probably, aren't at the level, or probably they need experienced players to help them. And right now there's a lot of big question marks. For me, the most important thing is to get a coach in place. Now, will they do it right now? Because basically, the season is practically done for them, and they don't want to bring him in and all of a sudden, still have a negative effect in terms of wins and losses. I don't know, but there's a lot of work to be done. Because
Nick, I know why I said what I said. It doesn't necessarily mean it's right, but when you have certain players, the way those Italian players are, veteran players who have played the game for a long time, who've played at a certain level, who have won, big trophies. It's, they need to be around the coach that they say, this guy knows what he's talking. This is a very, very credible coach, because or else it's like, yeah, okay, I don't want to listen to you, I know more than you type of thing, right? I'm not saying that that's the kind of character they have, those players, because I don't know them personally. But there's that risk of that happening, right?
100% that would happen. Then again, you try to put and say to yourself, were these players now, when they're brought in, because, having said that, they still have a responsibility. They have a responsibility because they were brought in to make a difference. They were brought in and paid a lot of money. Now, was that work done as well in terms of giving them that responsibility and making them be in an environment? I still look back at Bernardeschi and the comments he made publicly. For a player of that level to make public comments like that, it means that he doesn't feel a responsibility towards anyone there. Because to me, when a player like that comes in, you build relationships with these players and you build a trust so that the player can say, you know what, they brought me in for these reasons. They did all this for me, and I have an obligation towards them. And for him to go public like that basically tells you, I don't care. I'm going to say what I feel needs to be said publicly. And he doesn't care who he hurts in there, and that's something that to me is still a big no-no, and that's where I said that I think Bradley handled the situation in a very professional way, because he could have maybe went out publicly and said, well, these guys aren't bringing what I needed from them to the table, but he didn't do that. And in the end, there's always ways of handling yourself as a professional.
Nick, at one point we lost Jeremy here along the line, but that's okay. If he joins us, he joins us. If he doesn't, he doesn't. We already went a long time. It's been a lot of fun, Nick. I guess I'm going to see you Sunday, because every time the Saint Laurent semi-pros have a big game, I know that you drop by, usually go with your boy, your daughter. You kind of make it a little bit of a family event. And on Sunday at 4 p.m., they're playing at Vanier versus CF Montreal Reserves. I guess I'll see you there.
Yeah, I think I'll make my way there. Like you said, the Saint Laurent right now, it's crazy, because the other night I went to see a U16 game, a quarterfinal cup game.
Yeah, Coupe du Québec game, yeah.
And I have to, tip my hat to Rocco Placentino, because he's created an environment at Saint Laurent where everyone feels for each other. The semi-pro players went to watch that U16 game. My kids, after practice said, we want to go watch. So you see that there's that club environment, and that's something that it's extremely so important to feel a part of something.
Yes. Sens d'appartenance, they say, as they say en français, right? As you know, they do a great job at the club in terms of making sure emails are sent every week, letting everyone know that their teams are playing, kind of encouraging other teams to stick around before, after, other teams to come out. And once again, like you said, when the younger players start going to watch the older players, they're like, you know what? I want to play for this semi-pro team one day. When the semi-pro players start going to watch the younger players team, they feel, wow, they've given me a big sense of importance. Nick, I'm happy I brought it up because you and I attend a lot of those games. Some, unfortunately, have maybe not even ever attended a game. There are some games. There was a game last year, too, which was a U17 Coupe du Québec final between Saint Laurent and FC Laval. The ambiance was unbelievable. We're talking about over 1,000 people in the stands, the drums, the singing, the chanting, sometimes some fireworks or flares or smoke or whatever it is. The ambiance is incredible. And I don't know if I'm in left field here, but sometimes I see the crowd, I see what they're doing, and sometimes I think that Saint Laurent could actually play host to having a CPL franchise. Maybe I'm on the moon here, I'm in left field, but I'm wondering if they can support it. And I kind of think they can.
Well, from what they're showing now as a club, I think they have everything in place in terms of grassroots, in terms of competitive youth level, in terms of a semi-pro team, in terms of infrastructure, because they do have an indoor facility. They have 12 fields around it. I still think that they need a field of their own in terms of a turf field centrally where the semi-pro team can play their games. If the girls, if hopefully at one point they'll get a girls professional team. And Tony, you speak about CPL. For me, there's a market. There's got to be a market because first and foremost, when you think of CPL and the Canadian teams that are already there, Quebec needs a team. And I truly believe that even in and around Montreal, the CPL can be an important avenue and a great platform. It can help the CF Montreal. It can help local soccer, and it can help potential players because it could be another important. And I really think that it is.
Well, Nick, because you're going to need a 5,000 seat stadium, eh?
Yes.
That's safe to say 5,000 seats. I think the league average is about 3,500. You're going to need minimum a 4,000 seat stadium. Yeah. 5,000, I think, would be ideal.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I went to a couple of games in Halifax.
Yeah.
Okay. And they started off, they're downtown. They started off with mobile stands, right? Yeah. They were averaging between, I think, 4,000 and 4,500 to 5,000 people.
Yeah.
And what they did is basically justified to the city. It's been a few years now we're here on mobile stands. Look what we've produced. And all of a sudden now they're confirmed that now it's going to be a concrete stadium. And I think that's the aspect where I don't think that any CPL club should go in a 20,000 stadium. You should start from small because I really believe that when you think of a second division or a third division in Europe, they're not 20,000 fan stadiums at capacity. They're 5 to 8 to 10,000. And if you can fill up, and I the Halifax really amazed me because there's a following, there's a nice environment.
Yeah,
right?
I think one of two grass fields in the league. There could be more, but
grass fields, which is great. I got the opportunity with Stephen Hart there to see their surroundings, the stadium, and everything, and it was impressive. And I really, really believe that there's room for that because Tony, we talked about culture, we talked about environment, we talked about attaching ourselves to something. When you take an example of even what Ryan Reynolds done with Wrexham, right? And he went into a community in England and he felt, I need to learn what this community is about, need to feel what they're about, and brought it to a club. And all of a sudden now it's to talk around the world because he's attached to himself to something. They're in the 4th division right now, I think. It's League 1 or League 2. So you got to think that they've attached to them something that's going to keep growing. And this is why I still believe that a CPL team in and around the Montreal area, there's room for it. And especially if you create the right environment around it.
So I firmly believe this, that when it comes to developing players in this country, the best players, Quebec is in the top 2 provinces in the country. I believe that. Okay. We don't have a CPL team here, Nick. There are provinces that have a couple of CPL teams. Pretty much everyone in Canada has a CPL team, but the province of Quebec. So now, why? Like you're saying, we need a CPL team in Quebec. You'd love to see one in Montreal. I say to you, Nick DeSantis, I agree with you 100%. I support you 100%, and we need one. Why don't we have one?
So I think that first and foremost, we need, people to, because you have to understand that it's an important investment in terms of economically. You have to guarantee. Pardon?
There's money here.
There is money here, and now you need the right people, because you still need people. It is a business, Tony, and but professional sports, it's a business, but you need people with deep pockets that have a passion for it, because in the end, you want them to put the club in the best situation, because sports, when you talk about sports, it's about winning.
Yes.
And winning in the end, right? Everybody has that. Not everyone, but in an ownership that comes in, it's business sport. But the sporting part of it, you always want to put that in the best conditions to succeed. Because in the end, professional sports is about winning. And hopefully, that at one point, people will understand that there is room for that there's a big hype for soccer. We have a huge diversity here in Quebec, all right? And I look at, even when you think about a country like Belgium, that only Quebec, the province of Quebec, is bigger than all of Belgium. And think about all the players developed in Belgium, and Quebec has even a bigger diversity than Belgium.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Look at it, and I say, in terms of the culture, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And in terms of people that have it in their blood.
Well, I know, Nick, I know exactly what you're saying. It's a business, yes, but whoever is going to be part of the ownership group, in an ideal situation, if they don't make money, they have to be okay with it and want to continue to support it, because at the end of the day, it's got to be a passion. It's got to be a hobby. It's got to be something that you want to. Look, Nick, I'm going to say this, though, and because it was done in a public setting, I can say it. Give or take 5 months ago at Centre Nutrilait, on a Sunday late afternoon, a couple of university coaches asked a CF Montreal employee, I was 5 or 6 feet away, so when's the CPL coming to Quebec? And the CF Montreal employee said, I don't know. I don't think so. And they said, why not? And he said, because Joey wants people to come over here. That was in a public setting in front of me. A CF Montreal employee said he doesn't think a CPL team is coming in the province of Quebec because, of course, whoever has disposable income and wants to go out to watch a soccer game, they would want them to go over there.
Yeah, but if you look at Europe as well, there's your first division team, and then there's your community team and playing in fourth division that, people attach themselves to. But there's always that, like for me, I understand it to a certain extent, but I believe that it could be very helpful to an MLS franchise. Very helpful. Just in regards of thinking of the young players they have. And all of a sudden now, instead of playing in the PLSQ, with all due respect, all of a sudden now you're the young players, you're loaning them out to a club, to a team that's playing at a higher level, and you can prepare them even better. And all of a sudden the value's higher. And you can look at it both ways.
Yeah, you know what, Nick? I think a national training center could be very helpful too. Balou came out of the National Training Center. Piet came out of the National Training Center. There's a bunch of players who came out of the, Jules Anthony Vilsain was at the National Training Center. There's a bunch of players that could come out of a National Training Center. When you have a National Training Center, instead of having an academy that only has spot for 20, 22 players, you have another 20 or 22 there. So instead of having a pot of 22 developed, now all of a sudden you have a pot of 40, or you can have a pot of 50. But a National Training Center on the boys' side doesn't exist either. There's no private academy here that exists either. They just, and if you want to exist, if you play games, they're going to tell you that you're going to get sanctioned. The federation is. So,
So Tony, but this is
what I'm getting at is there's a monopoly right now. All right. In terms of an academy, there's a monopoly in terms of, and so, I mean,
but Tony,
the only province in Canada that doesn't have a CPL team. I mean,
no, that's for sure. But again, you talked about, the youth and there's a monopoly, but if the Canadian Federation, right, did this new reform with national license, right, national licensing, provincial licensing, for me, national licensing and the clubs that attain that should be clubs because the structure and the guidelines have to be of a certain level and the coaches have to be qualified coaches. To me, it's saying, well, it shouldn't be only the CF Montreal, Vancouver. It can't be only them developing players. It has to be that these clubs that hold national licenses, with the structure they have in place and the guidelines we've put in place, they have to be able to develop players as well. That's the way I see it. And that's the way it should be, because it can't be only 3 clubs in Canada with academies that develop players.
Well, it would be great if, like you said, those clubs are identified as being affiliate clubs, right? Affiliate clubs. And you go in and you help them train their players. You help them train their coaches. Everyone's on the same page. And then, you can help send players over there. But, I mean, they have an affiliate club program. And if you want in, you're going to have to pay.
Yeah, I know. But why would Saint Laurent look at it? I think they have all the structure to develop players. They have a platform right now in a semi-pro league, right? Yep. And even there, right, your aspiration as a kid, it's only normal that you want to attain, first and foremost, the semi-pro. But then it's only normal, too, that the next step is, am I able to get to CPL? Am I able to get to MLS? Am I able to get to Europe? They're stepping stones. They're platforms. Yeah. And I think right now, when I look at Saint Laurent and the structure it put in place, there's a platform for young kids. And hopefully that platform could become a CPL platform that can become an MLS platform. And the CF Montreal is part of that platform. Yeah. But it's only normal, too, developing players as a club. There's got to be revenue that goes with it. If the Canadian Federation is telling clubs, national license club, to invest more, anything in life, when you're investing, you're saying, okay, if I invest, what could my revenue be? What could the income be? And this is where I still find that, clubs just lose players on nothing. It can't be that way. That's not how it works in Europe and in the rest of the world, is that if I'm developing a player as a club and all of a sudden he signs on my semi-pro team and this kid has potential, it's only normal now that this kid that's from the semi-pro team to whether it's a CPL team, a USL team, or even an MLS team, there has to be a negotiation in terms of, well, we developed this player belongs to us. What are you willing to pay to get this player? Which only makes sense.
Yeah, but if no one is willing to play, the player's career goes round and round and he never ends up playing anywhere.
But that's a structure that needs to be created in the culture like the rest of the world.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Look, Nick, you're preaching to converted. I love the ambiance of some of the games. By the way, they're not the only ones, eh? I've been to some FC Laval games. They're absolutely fantastic as well. Makes for a great ambiance as well. I think we agree on something, whether it's a Montreal or Quebec. We'd like to see a CPL team in Quebec, in the province of Quebec, seeing as you and I live here. Of course, we'd love to have it as close to home as possible. Why not even across the street? But wherever it's going to be, we're going to be there. Hey, listen, CPL is not the biggest league out there. But you know what? At the time, when you were playing, there were bigger leagues too. Maybe none bigger in North America, but you were able to put 10,000 people in Robillard. I'm optimistic, even with an MLS team here, I'm optimistic that a CPL team here can get 5,000 people per game. I'm very optimistic because I don't know about you, but I just know a bunch of people who love soccer and love to go watch games. And you know what? I think it's going to work. Nick, on that note, I'll see you at Vanier on Sunday afternoon. I'll see you there. And, of course, CF Montreal Sunday night at Toronto FC. And don't forget, Messi and Inter Miami at Nashville on Saturday night. Thanks for watching, everyone. The Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. For Jeremy Filosa, who we lost him at one point, and Nick DeSantis, I'm Tony Marinaro. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. And check us out on Twitter at SickPod, CFMTL. Special thanks to Shane Gaumont and Master Control for setting us up. Cheers. Have a great day.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.